Hey everybody, if you were in class just a little while ago and our technology went out, bear with me. I'm going to go through the entire PowerPoint for those who weren't able to make it to class. And so here is what I would have done in class if we had an actual video and audio. These are all strategies to use while you're learning new material. It could be text, it could be a video, it could be a demonstration, it could be a piece of art. Whatever your text is, these are good strategies to use to help support students, especially if you know that they may be grappling with with a challenging text and so forth. The first one we talked about was reciprocal teaching. This is where kids work together to help each other learn. It's done in small groups, and the students are in groups of four, and they're each given a role. There can be summarizer, clarifier, uh, predictor, and questioner. And the idea is that they assist or they facilitate the group in answering questions and coming up with a summary and making predictions. If you want to learn more about what it might look like in action, the video down here will give you an idea. I used reciprocal teaching with my seventh graders quite a lot, maybe once a week when we were doing novel units or whatever. But here's an idea of what you would give a group of older students, something to turn into you at the end of the class period. This would be per group. All four students in the group would be writing on the same page. And so this is reciprocal teaching. I thought it was effective. The video is pretty good and it shows students using the strategies in action. There is one where a second grade class is using the strategy as well. It's a little more clear what the roles are and how the students facilitate the roles with their groups. And if you want to see that, let me know. And I will, of course, attach that video link to our module 7. Ugh, 7, can you believe it? Okay. Then we talked about question answer relationship. And this is where students think about the kinds of questions being asked of them. Um, this is going to help them really consider the kinds of thinking that needs to take place when they respond to questions from a text. Because it's important for kids to know, do I need to refer to the text? Is it one of those right there in the text questions? Is it asking me something literal from the text? Is it in the text, but I have to sort of either bring parts of the text together or maybe use my own experiences to help me come up with an answer? Is it in your head where you're thinking about the author's purpose? Is it in your head where you're thinking on your own? So this is going to help kids, especially if they're not sure how to answer a question. Those in your head questions, those are higher order thinking questions that students may not be that familiar with using. And so keep those things in mind. This is really good for having students think through the proper way in order to answer a variety of questions. More information can be found on the link down here if you want to learn more about it. And it's also in your textbook. Questioning the author is a good one for chunking the text. And I talked to you guys about that in class today too. Students ask questions about a text. Questions can be related to confusing or maybe really important things that they need to take from the text after they've read it. And the questions can also be evaluative, where you're actually asking yourself the quality or how well the author perhaps responded or described a certain topic or concept in the text. Some ideas of how to use this with kids. And honestly, it's really great for having students have stopping points so that they stop, think, continue. A lot of kids don't do that naturally, and this is a great way to prompt them to get into the habits of stopping, thinking, and then moving on so that they know that they're cognitively processing the information as they read it. Here, students, you would first analyze the text as a teacher. You would identify stopping points, segmenting the text, and then ask questions about, usually based on what the author intended. It could be things like, what's the author's message here? What does the author really mean when they say this? Or did the author explain things clearly? Sometimes if they don't, it's really important to know from the students if they need more clarification or understanding, or say descriptions or examples of what was being learned. So more information on the link down here. Okay, this is where our video went out. So we were talking about discussion webs and we talked about how it's a great way to get kids talking about polarized, perhaps, questions or topics that you might be learning about in class. The example I used in class was legalizing marijuana. It could be something also like climate change. If uh, things, topics that people might be for or against or agree or disagree with. Here you're having kids look at the pros and the cons or the fors or the againsts of certain topics. And then as a group, deciding what as a group they've decided their joint response is. And it could be where some students agree with the topic, some students are against the topic, but you come together and you have some sort of way to express your group's feelings or thoughts or beliefs on the topic. It's a great way to get kids thinking and using or just basically looking at both sides of a situation or an issue and coming up with a group consensus of what they believe or what the group believes about or has learned about the topic or the issue. It's good for history classes, English classes, science classes, and lots of other classes where, polarized topics may come up and it may really lend itself to valuable discussions, but also have kids learn that skill that they need as lifelong learners of how to have a conversation about topics without getting angry or or it becoming a problem like we see a lot of adults having in today's world. Now, the new stuff that I didn't get to in class, guided reading procedure, another during learning strategy. And this one is where students read this is basically, we learned about this in the before learning strategies, but here, students turn the book over, they talk about what they learned from the text as a group, and the teacher points out any inconsistencies, and students go back to reading. So it's another way of sort of stopping them and having them think about the text. Not as many stopping points as you would see in questioning the author, but it's got the same thing in mind where we want students to be metacognitively aware of what they're reading and what they're learning. For some students and certain groups of kids, this is an important skill to learn. When to stop, when to ask questions, and then when to clarify and go on. There we go. All right, and here's more. Guided reading procedure. Okay. Interact is different. Now, I don't know how valuable this strategy would be for you guys, but I always keep it in my PowerPoint because I think it's a really interesting strategy. This one is going to provide reflective discussions of critical reading texts. So students are basically going to have a conversation, maybe something similar to what you might have done in your discussion web, some sort of topic that may have polarizing sides or a variety of different students' beliefs or perspectives of it. Have them have a conversation, and then at the end, they rate how they feel like each one of the people in their group would have responded to certain statements or questions. And so, let me see if I've got the example here. Hopefully, this is the example. We're going to find out. Okay. Oh, well, looks like the link is broken, but that's okay. In class, I can on Thursday bring in an example of what an interact might look like. Actually, I can do that now because it's really pretty simple. I can do that on this. So interact, strategy, example. Then I go to images. And here's an idea of what it might look like. So here's what it might look like on a blank form. So I'm going to you will have statements here, the names of your group members here, and then a yes or a no on if they agree or disagree with whatever was being discussed. That's kind of the idea there. I'm trying to see if I've got a completed one here that might be a little more. This one's a little different. This one might actually be, oh, look at that. Right there. You can't see it. Lovely. Because it's teacher pay teachers and they're not going to let me see it unless I'm paying them money and I'm not paying them any money. But the point is, You have your team members across the board, and they have a discussion. I think that Mary Lou would have agreed with this statement. Did I understand that correctly, Mary Lou? And you would have a conversation, and she might say, yes, that is exactly how I feel. Or she might say, no, don't you remember? I stated blah, blah, blah. In a way, it's a good way to evaluate how well the conversation or discussion has taken place in the small group, but it's also a good way to revisit ideas related to the topic you're learning about. So that is interact. Again, it's not necessarily something that would be useful for every class, but I feel like it's an interesting enough strategy that I always keep it as one of the things I discuss with you guys when we're talking about during learning strategies. Okay. Directed teaching thinking activity. Oh my goodness, the DRTA. It involves prediction, verification, interpretation, and judgments. So, let me see if I've got another screen on this thing. No, I don't, and that's okay. So here it involves you use open-ended questions. Why do you think so? What do you think? Why do you think so? Can you prove it? It's another one of those chunking strategies where the teacher finds predetermined places to stop. And now instead of asking questions about the author's purpose or the author itself, you can ask a variety of questions. It's so similar to questioning the author, but here you're still chunking, but you've got much more flexibility in the types of questions you can ask students. You can have them write their answers down, or you can just have discussions in the classroom about them, have them prepared to discuss. How you use it is up to you. I'm hoping that let's find out. My link works. We're going to find out. So you can read more about it. Drum roll. And it works. So you want to read more about DRTAs? I've got more information here. You have your textbook as well. It's a great strategy for chunking that text, especially if it's a long text or a video or whatever. Have them stop, think, respond to a question, then move on. And if they can't answer the question, what does that tell them? That tells them they need to go back and revisit what they've read so that they do understand how to answer the question. Okay, moving on. Okay, now this next section is about comprehension levels before I get to the next strategy. Comprehension levels, that's not a strategy, but there are different comprehension levels that we need to consider. And when we start talking more about Bloom's taxonomy coming up, this leads straight to it. So there's literal comprehension, there's interpretive comprehension, and then there's applied or evaluative comprehension, okay? Literal comprehension, that's I know literally I can answer you a question that I can find directly in the text, word for word. If I'm typing it out on a paper, I could probably copy paste it, and I've got my answer from the text. That's literal. There's one correct answer. That's literal. Interpretive's a little bit different. You're going to have one specific answer, but here with interpretive comprehension, students have to do a lot more individual or independent thinking. So the questions require both the text, but also their experiences. So when we think about the question answer relationship strategy from previously in the PowerPoint, it's kind of the same kind of thinking. Interpretive means I take the text, I take what I know, I put them together, and I come up with the right answer. The right answer. But then applied evaluative, that's where you can have a variety of answers. If evaluative or applied is where the student goes beyond the text. They're thinking about the topics, they're thinking about what they learned, but their answer is going to probably be unique to their situation or their experiences and so forth. So these three levels play into the next strategy we're going to talk about. I'm not going to go into too much of this. If you want to read more about literal, interpretive or applied, knock yourself out. It's really interesting stuff, and it's really going to help you when you start asking your students questions when you're teaching in the classroom. But getting there for, kind of going further, here's an example of something you can do with students. The example text here is not the best example text in the world, but they're going to write a yes or a no for an answer. So for the literal level questions, I might ask them 4 literal level questions from what they've maybe read or watched or whatever, where they're going to say yes or no. Then you're going to have some questions that are interpretive. They use what from the something from the text and they use what they know from real life, they come up with a yes, no answer. And we know that there's going to be correct, right, and wrong answers here. Applied is a little bit different. What I would do with your applied level questions, if you create something like this, is have a space for them to explain why. Because it's one thing to say yes or no to an applied or evaluative question. It's something else to have them explain their answer because that way you know that they're really thinking about that yes or that no answer for the applied part of the strategy. The strategy does take some work on the teacher's part. I don't imagine there's a lot of textbooks out there that would provide something like this for teachers to use with kids. At the same time, though, it's going to help me know which kids are learning literally from the text, which kids are able to bring their own personal experiences in with the text and come up with an answer, which kids are able to think of beyond the text with the applied. Keep this in mind, though, you will have kids who do really well at the applied and the interpretive and don't do well at the literal. And you can think about why that would be. A lot of times it's because sometimes students rely on their memory to answer questions and they're unwilling to go back to the text. That might happen. And if that has happened, don't be surprised. But again, it's a great way to sort of give a variety of question types because kids need a variety of question types. Sure, they need to learn facts. Literal questions are good for that. But they also need to use their own reasoning, their own higher level thinking skills in order to respond to questions related to what you're teaching. Moving on. We're going to get to the end of this before you know it. Double entry journals. I love them. You're going to love them. Double entry journals can be designed in a variety of ways. Basically, if you have a learning journal with your students in your classroom, you can have them take notes in their journals by using two columns. And you as a teacher can decide what those columns will represent. Do you want them to have main idea and supporting details? Do you want them to write down the vocabulary and then find the definitions? Is one column going to be for the questions that you're providing them, and the other column the answers that they identify from the text or from their own interpretation? It's up to you as a teacher, but double entry journals are so multifunctional and we see them used all the time in lots of different content areas. So keep this in mind as a way for students to take notes as they read. Split screen notes, just like double entry journals. This one's really more for your students who need visualization. So here's one where students are taking notes from a science class learning about mitosis. Metaphase and an image of metaphase. They maybe draw that image, find an image from the internet, but they're connecting a visual representation along with a concept or whatever your learning might be. Split screen notes is just another way of doing double entry journaling, but using more of a visual representation to help kids keep track of their learning. All right, this is a fun one. Say the last word for me. I'm pretty sure it's on your chart that you guys should be working on right now, or at least working on after you watch this video. But save the last word for me is it's a way to have students reflect on what they've read. I've seen this used in small groups where students have a shared reading. They read at home and they come back and they basically find a quote from what they've read, write it on a note card, and they share it with this. I wrote this quote down. Here's why I find that this quote resonates with me. And then everybody talks about that quote. And then the next person goes. They share their quote, why it resonates, talk about the quote. It really is a great way to guide discussion on texts that really kind of lend themselves to that sort of discussion. All right, and sketch to stretch. Another fun note-taking strategy. It's a reflection strategy. Sketch to stretch is for those students who it really helps them with creating a visual representation of what they've learned. So here students read an assigned passage or a chapter or a text, and then they individually draw something that they feel like represents what they've learned from the text, or perhaps it's actually a visualization, like I would use with my students when we were reading The Hobbit. If you were in class today, you remember me talking about that. I actually use Sketch to Stretch occasionally with books like that, where visualization was very important. And then in small groups, they share their pictures, they talk about why they drew them, etc. It's a lot like the previous strategy where they're sharing their reflection, but this is more of an illustration, visualization. Okay. Most of you guys are familiar with Cornell note-taking from your high school days. Cornell note-taking is just a really specific strategy that helps students keep track of what they're learning from a text. Trying to think. Um, Basically, it's designed in a certain format. I'll share the format with you guys on Thursday. The format's pretty structured, but I think for some students, that structured format is really going to help them keep track of a lot of information. So Cornell note-taking is another option that you could use for during reading. We're going to do a think aloud on Thursday. I was saving think alouds for Thursday anyway. Think alouds are when teachers model how to work through difficult text. Actually, we saw some examples of that when we were doing metacognition. Those think alouds can be used by you as a teacher as a during learning strategy. So keep this in mind as well. And then finally, there are the videos I showed you guys couple of weeks ago. So think of the three strategies you might find most useful for you to use in your classroom, depending on what you see yourself teaching when you get to the high school or middle school. And once you're done, turn that into Canvas. The due date, I believe, is at the end of the week. If you need more time, let me know on Thursday. I know we cut class short today because our technology went on the fritz again. But otherwise, we'll meet again on Thursday. We'll do a little more work on this and then really start thinking about how that might look in the classroom. So Thursday should be much more fun than today. Today was more about Dr. Bippert being cranky because technology went out. Anyway, you guys have a great day. I'll see you Thursday. Take care.